Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm okay.
Same.
Ugh.
Well, my name is Madeline,
I'm Olivia.
and welcome back to another episode of Another Picture Show podcast.
Yay!
Yay!
Still doing it. Still
We're-
strong.
We're still. You thought we were done. We're back again. So basically, this is a movie review podcast. The premise is I don't watch a lot of movies, and my dear friend here, Olivia, is a film buff, a filmmaker. She is a all-around amazing human being. And she, yeah, I'm really hyping you up. I want something. I need something from you. I will talk to you after the show.
That's how our friendship works.
Yeah. Olivia will pick a movie that I haven't seen, and or one that we both seen, or one that we both have not seen.
Movies we want to watch together, essentially.
Exactly. And she will introduce it to me. I don't know what it is ahead of time. Olivia knows what it is usually ahead of time. She's going to introduce the movie to me, and then we're going to talk about it for a little bit. Then we're going to take a break, go watch it, and then jump back in and give our thoughts, opinions, hot or cold takes.
Yes. First, let's just check in with each other. How are you doing? I feel like things have been a little chaotic, so I just want to check in for everyone's sake.
I'm good. I am just naturally a person that's always all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on my 4th cup of coffee today,
Excellent.
and it's early. It's early on in the day. Like, I haven't even gone to work yet. I work nights, which sucks. But yeah, no, I'm doing good. I'm thriving, surviving, and slightly thriving.
Good.
Yeah. How about you?
A lot's been going down in my neck of the woods. Just around my community, things are a little chaotic, and I'm pretty kind of hands-on with that. I won't get too much into it right now, but I'm doing okay overall. I'm just a little overwhelmed. But this podcast is a source of like rejuvenation for me, so I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, I'm glad to be a part of your source of rejuvenation.
But now that you say that you want something from me, I'm like,
it's darkened your doorway.
I'm like, oh no. But with that, I guess I can introduce the movie that we're going to be watching this week. Another sort of spooky movie as we head into Halloween season. This movie is not necessarily a Halloween movie, but it is a spookier movie that I think would be really interesting to talk about on this podcast.
Okay.
So with that, this week, we're going to be watching Jordan Peele's Us.
Okay. I haven't seen any of his movies, so I'm interested.
Yes.
Okay.
I think the reason I wanted to do this movie, I feel like it's very, very relevant to a lot of things happening right now. It's just like a really good movie to like have discussions about, I think. So I'm excited to introduce you to the works of Jordan Peele and dive deep. What do you know about the movie?
Not a lot. I've seen the trailer, and it seems like there's some sort of almost like alternate reality or alternate universe where these like demon or like, sinister copies of people in our dimension exist, and somehow like the fabric of between those two dimensions has been broken, and now the sinister copies are like trying to wipe out like our universe's copies of ourselves. So that's all I really know, and I don't know, like who knows? I mean, I'll have to watch it and see like the symbolism around it. Like I don't know like what they're trying to like highlight as far as like good, quote unquote, good versus evil.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been meaning to watch these movies. It's not like these aren't movies that like I actively like avoided, like Fight Club or like or
They're a little bit
Hamilton.
newer too. So we'll put a spoiler warning here, because what usually we just kind of dive right into the movies. So like if you're listening to this podcast, this is a spoiler podcast. Like we are going to be talking about everything that happens in this movie. And if you haven't seen it yet, then you can take a break with us and then come back and watch it, or come back and listen to our review.
I would kind of like that if people had the time to like just like watch the movie and then listen. Like obviously like it'd be kind of like inconvenient to like listen to the first 10 minutes of a podcast, pause it, watch a movie, and then go back.
Yeah.
But you know, if you're interested in a movie, like absolutely, like, and you want to have a fresher take or like understand, I guess, or recall more of what we're talking about, yeah, I highly recommend watching the movie and then diving in with us, because who knows, you might remember something from like the last time you saw it, or you've never seen it before, and we're just so awesome you have to keep up with what we're watching. So
yeah, I mean, a lot of the movies we've done so far have been like, you know, from the 90s or early 2000s, so like there's some time and separation that, you know, people have had time to see these movies, but this one came out like last year. It feels like it came out like 5 years ago, because 2020 is like, you know, 10 years
I know his
long.
first movie was Get Out, right? When did that one come out?
That was
like
2016 2017. I don't know.
I haven't seen that one either. I'll have to give that one a
so I just want to give people the, you know, the chance to opt out of listening to this if they haven't seen it. I don't know why you would click on this review if you haven't seen the movie, but you know, just throwing it out there.
The like brackets of like the YouTube description should be like spoiler heavy.
yeah. So with that, I guess we can go take a break, go watch it, and we'll come back with our review of Us. Do you have anything else to say before we do that?
I love you.
I love you too. So nice.
And I love anybody listening to this.
She still wants something from me, but all right.
Maybe.
So with that, we'll be back with our review of Us in 3, 2, 1. And we're back.
We are back, y'all.
What did you think?
It was pretty good. Like I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't like blown away.
Okay.
I thought it was good, like, and I thought cast phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
No doubt about that. But when I watched it, I was like, oh, this is pretty good. And then I don't know, I guess I feel like it was missing something for me, and I'm still trying to figure out what it was. Okay. I have a few ideas of what it was missing for me, but I want to hear your thoughts on it. I mean, you saw it before, but...
Yeah, did you watch it once or twice?
I watched it once, so I was having a hard time, like, finding it, so I found it, like, I had to do a free trial for, like, a...
Cinemax
add-on, a free trial, okay. You did that
so
too?
Did me. Yep.
So I watched it, so actually how I watched it was very funny. I watched it last night, alone, in my room, which is not a good idea for me to watch like a horror movie by myself. But I had all my lights, like my lamps on, and then I was knitting, and it's on my phone. So anytime, like, cause I'm anti like jump scares. Mm-hmm. So anytime I thought like a jump scare was coming, I was like knitting a sock, and I was like hold the knitting like over my phone a little bit, and I was like peek over my knitting. I was like, oh no, we're good. And then I'd keep knitting. And then at some point, I was so invested in it, I did put my knitting down and focused. So, and then today, like, I was at work and I was thinking about it a lot. And that's when I kind of like wrote down, like, what was missing for me? Like, what, like, why? Like, it's a good film. Like, it's a good movie. Mm-hmm. But I was like, no knocking Jordan Peele because he did a great job. But I'm like, I feel like I'm missing something here. Like, I feel like there's something either, like, I didn't understand from the movie, or like it's just missing something in general.
Yeah.
And like I have like subconscious beef with it.
Yeah, like the first time I watched it, I felt the same way. And I feel like a lot of people felt that way, because I mean you didn't see Get Out before you saw this. So but I think a lot of people went into it thinking that it was going to be similar to Get Out, because Get Out is a very like tight film. Like it's just like easy to consume in in that it's like the themes are obvious, what it's about is obvious, everything is like, you know, there, like you just get it, like it's easy to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like a very tight film altogether. It's very well made, all that stuff. This one is also very well made, but the themes aren't as in your face. It's like it's a much bigger story. It's like covering a lot of different things, and the more you watch it and the more you kind of like study it, like it makes sense, or at least for me it makes a lot more sense, and I can appreciate it a lot more. Since I've had a lot of time to sit with it. It's like one of those movies that like gets better the more you sit with it, I think, because I definitely I felt the same way the first time I watched it. But before we get into it, let me just give the stats real fast. So Us is a 2019 American horror film written and directed by Jordan Peele, starring Lupita Nyong'o, Winston Duke, Elizabeth Moss, and Tim Heidecker. The film follows Adelaide Wilson and her family, who are attacked by a group of menacing doppelgangers. Does that sound about right?
It does, but it's slightly misleading.
How so?
I guess it doesn't. I mean, it's not super misleading because like that is what happens. But I guess, you know, you don't, when you go in, you don't realize that she was exposed to the doppelgangers like when she was a child.
Mm-hmm.
Well, exposed to the doppelgangers. We're a spoiler podcast, so like
we already gave a spoiler warning like in the intro, so
yeah,
we're just getting into it now.
So like, yeah, I mean, I think it's just, I mean, it's not that misleading. I'm just like, it's so fresh in my mind that I'm like, well, technically she is the doppelganger, or like the doppelganger is her. Like, do we even know what's going on here? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's like, I did like the twist, the reveal. Also, I love that it was like the last like 45 seconds of the movie.
Yeah.
Was like the big reveal. But I think I figured it out pretty early on.
Yeah.
I think I figured out probably like the scene where they're talking about the beach and she's like, oh, we're going back there. And she's like thinking about when she was a dancer and like the mirror, like the reflection was staring at her. I'm like, something's not right. Like they don't tell the full story. Yeah. Obviously, they're not telling the full story of what happened in the House of Mirrors when she was a little girl. Mm-hmm. And I was like, maybe she is the the doppelganger did grab her. Because like I think the one mistake I think marketing wise they made, because I watched the trailer before I watched the movie, is that in the most popular trailer it shows a clip, like it shows at the end, like the clip at the end where Adelaide as a girl is facing herself in the mirror in the House of Mirrors, and the reflection grabs her neck. Yeah. And that, I think, if they had left that out of the trailer, it would have been harder for me, mostly because I watched the trailer, then immediately watched the movie. It would have been harder for me to figure out. But I was thinking back to that, I was like, they didn't show that in the beginning, so that must mean something, like, it cuts back to that in the end. And then I was like, well, maybe they switched places. Mm-hmm. So... Also, I'm a genius. Like, let's be real.
Well, yeah. Like the first time I watched it, I was like, all right, so they make this whole big thing about her being traumatized by this thing that happened in the Hall of Mirrors, but we never really see it. Like, if it was literally just like she saw herself and got freaked out, then like doesn't really make sense. So like throughout the whole movie, you're like, yeah, we're gonna come back to that at some point. But I think the movie does a good job of kind of like diverting you from thinking about that for too long, and then like brings it back at the very end to like tie it all together. Because I also like figured it out like first time. I was like,
yeah.
Right, so
I mean, I'm not actually genius. I think it's like, I think they kind of wanted you to like figure it out a little bit, and then and then it was like that satisfying moment of being like, I was right. And then it kind of, I think it also will then kind of make you think like, well, why did they make them switch places? Like, what's like the thing to be discussed about in that? And then like insert, social commentary discussion here. But what I liked a lot was like how they like the subtlety of like leading up to like the grand reveal, like that she was a tether, or the original Adelaide turned into a tether, however you want to like view it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like how like at certain points like she would kind of like move the same way slightly, like when she was with the shears, when she was stabbing like the one of the girl doppelgangers, like one of the twins, the doppelganger, and like the kid comes in and she's like just going absolutely ham sandwich on this girl, and then she like stands up like super straight and like yeets the shears. I was like just the movements, like the mannerisms were like similar to that of the tethered, and like even and like how she knew immediately, like when she went to when Jason got snatched, she knew immediately where to go. Like, yeah, go to the Hall of Mirrors because that's where you met your first, like the doppelganger the first time, but then you knew exactly where to go, like beyond just like the, you know, mirrored part. Like you knew exactly which hall to turn down, which staircase to go down, like you knew exactly what blind spots were where.
Mm-hmm.
So I was picking up, I was like,
yep,
she's been here before.
Mm-hmm.
She knows this place.
Yeah, so like, what do you think? I mean, before we get into themes and all that fun stuff, do you have any other like things that you liked, things that you did not like, before we get into all the deep meat of it all?
I thought the two like the daughter and Lupita did fantastic. Like the two lead women, young women and women. I mean, Lupita Nyong'o's still young, so young women. I thought their performances, like honestly, like outshined Jason. I mean, he's like what, 9? Like let's not let's not judge too harshly a 9-year-old versus Lupita Nyong'o. Like that's a pretty tough comparison. But
he didn't have much to do, so
right, exactly. But like the two women, mother-daughter combo just slayed it for me. They both killed it. I mean, at first I was like, oh, Lupita carried the whole movie, but then the more I thought of it, I was like, nah, Zora was like pretty badass, and like she had no fear of just like taking out her own doppelganger, which I thought was pretty ballsy. I mean, neither did Jason. Like he just like was like, I'm gonna walk you back into the flames. But I think she kind of like possibly could have instilled that courage in him, because like an hour before she had just run over her own doppelganger and just like, you know, threw her into oblivion. As far as like performances and stuff, I thought Lupita, and I forgot to write down the young lady who played Zora, but I thought both of them did really good.
Yeah.
And like, but then the entire cast, like including like the Elizabeth Moss and the other guy,
Tim Heidecker?
Yeah, him. I thought all of them, and like the girls that played the twins, I thought they all did a really, really, really good job of playing the doppelgangers. Yeah. Like they did a really good job of like separating. Like it was like, oh, obviously they're the same person, sort of. But like they did a good job of like the mannerisms and like the lack of like a formal language. Elizabeth Moss was creepy as hell. Lupita Nyong'o's Red, I guess they call her. I had to look up like what she was supposed to be called. Red, super creepy.
Yeah.
The hoarse voice, and I was like, ugh. Every time she spoke, I was like. Last thing, I was looking up the cast like just to get the character names, so I had everything correct in my mind. And I really like how all of the doppelgangers had kind of like planet, like almost like pagan names, or like names that are like related to like evil-ish in you know, theology. One of the twin daughters on the Tyler family was named Io, and then the kid, Jason's doppelganger, was named Pluto. Like very like secular but also like eerie kind of names. I liked that touch. That was nice, even though they don't really.
Pluto, like I know a little bit of the reason behind some of the names. Like Pluto is, you know, the planet furthest from the sun, and it's so far from the sun that it's pretty much like shrouded in darkness like all the time. Just like the tethered are living underground, far from warmth, far from, you know, sunlight, just like the tethered are living underground. What is the daughter's name? Umbre? It's like the plural.
Like, yeah, umbra or something like that.
Yeah, it's like umbre, and it's like the plural of umber
Mm-hmm.
is like shadows, like something like that. I'm forgetting like specifically what it is, but it has to do with like shadows, and she's like the plural of that. And then red obviously is like they're all jumpsuits and kind of like a revolutionary color.
Yeah. Although Abraham is the only like religious name that is like supposed to be like a decent person in the Bible and in like, Christian faith.
Mm-hmm.
Like Abraham and Sarah, he's like the father basically of Christianity in some respects. Like depending on like what
Yeah, like
religious order.
he's like one of the founding fathers, if you will, of Christianity and Judaism and Islam. To I think, if I'm remembering, they all kind of stem back to Abraham in one way or
Mm-hmm.
another. Yeah, I didn't do enough research to find out why his name's Abraham, but I think it ties into the like religious themes throughout this movie too.
Right.
So with that, like, did you look up what Jeremiah 11:11 is?
I almost did and I totally forgot. The only thing I actually looked up, which is probably more obscure, was the Hands Across America thing. Because I was like, was that a real movement? And it was.
Yep,
But
yep,
I did
yep.
not look up Jeremiah 11:11. So tell me, lay it on me.
All right, so Jeremiah 11:11, it says, "Therefore, thus saith the Lord, Behold, I will bring evil upon them, which they shall not be able to escape, and though they shall cry unto me, I will not hearken unto them." Let me look up Jeremiah 11:10 to give context. Jeremiah 11:10. "They have returned to the sins of their ancestors who refused to listen to my words. They have followed other gods and served them. Both Israel and Judah have broken the covenant I made with their ancestors." Which I guess that ties into Abraham, the name Abraham, because he's the like original covenant, like
Mm-hmm.
he made with Abraham. So maybe that's why. But yeah, so Jeremiah 11:10 and Jeremiah 11:11. What do you think?
Makes sense. I'm picking it up. I'm picking up what you're throwing down, Jordan Peele. Thinking about like this like wrath of, God, if you will, because, Red keeps talking about how she was like chosen by
Chosen.
God,
Mm-hmm.
and she, had found God, and that's how she was like decided to exact her like revenge. And I guess like the timing to me was very interesting. Like why then? Like was it just because they were going back to the beach? Like was it, you know, was it just like everything fell into place like at that time, or was she waiting for like the perfect opportunity? I have so many questions like about like I think that's what was lacking a little bit for me now that I think about it. I think it was like I wanted to know not even a ton more, just a little bit more about the tethered.
Okay.
I want to know like just it doesn't even have to be like a ton more. Like I don't need like a whole prequel or anything like that, but I do want to know like can they travel like there's tunnel systems, they kind of hint at that, but like can they travel extensively, or are they kind of like bound to where they were like spawned from? I don't know, because if Red wanted to exact her revenge, like she could really, if she could travel, she could really do it at any time, or was she waiting for them to go to the lake house / beach and then be like, aha, like the time is nigh, like
Yeah. Well, I think that was like where she was taken, and so I think it was kind of she was waiting for them to go back to that spot. And also she mentioned that like this was a huge like revolutionary undertaking, so there was a lot of planning, a lot of like convincing all the other tethered to join her in this, because otherwise it wouldn't amount to anything other than her going back up to the surface by herself. And I don't know how strong the bond is between the tethered and the people on the surface, but I don't know. It's a good question.
I think really literal sometimes, like with movies like these. I get
Yeah,
really
I
literal
think
about
like
it.
my main critiques coming out of the movie the first time I watched it, I was like, that doesn't make sense. Like, Where'd they get all the jumpsuits and scissors from?
I literally wrote that down. I was like, where did they get the shears? Where did they get the jumpsuits? Like, they didn't all just like infiltrate fucking Gap and
Yeah.
like wipe out their red overall section? And then my other question was like, it seems like this only pertains to Americans. So like naturally, I think too literally, I'm like, well, like what if like somebody from Mexico just like shows up and like marries like an American? Like, did they just like a tether just doesn't spawn for that like, you know, American, you know, national or Mexican national that like rolled up and married an American, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's like a level of like suspension of disbelief when it comes to this movie that I've learned to have. Like, you
I have
know,
a tough time.
There's a lot of questions you can have about the world building. Some of it is, you know, valid, but I think what's more important is like what the movie's trying to say. So with that, like, what do you think is the kind of overall message of this movie?
Okay. I guess the idea of like privilege and like
Mhm.
opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And then also like battling your demons. But I was like, the thing is I think that I thought about that and then I kind of like, I mean, it could be possible, but to focus on like the privilege, I just thought what was really good was like they literally like they are the same.
Yep.
They're the same thing, and they talk about it. It's like, oh, the government copied, you know, everyone, but they couldn't copy your soul. So essentially, it's like two
different people
like sharing a soul, and then my mind was like, well, is the soul split, or is it like one has the soul and the other one doesn't? Who doesn't have the soul? Like what constitutes like a soul transition? Like where do they like high five and like Freaky Friday the soul across to like the other body? I don't know how that works. So I didn't want to immediately be like, oh, the people on the surface are the ones with souls, and the people and the tethered are the ones without souls, because like you don't know, like you really don't know, because you can see in like a justifiable way like why the tethered would be so like pissed off and like stabby. I get it. Yeah. And then it's also like because you know they had like such a hardship and like they never learned English, like they had this weird like rudimentary language of like
it's like, okay, box. So one, I don't mean to cut you off, but one, I guess, interpretation of this movie is that it's about like the class divide in America and how there's a lot of otherness, like fear of the other, but the other is still us. Like we could easily be the other and the other could easily be us. Like we are all the same and we're all Americans, as you say, as they say in the movie. So like the people who are underground, they were created by the government, just like the lower class, like homelessness and poverty and all these people living under systems of oppression in America, like that was created by like the system that we live under, right? When it's like when you're stripped of all the things of privilege that the people on the surface have, like learning how to talk, like all these things, that's like how we would be if we didn't have all the things that we have on the surface.
Yeah.
So that's one interpretation, and I think that's like the most popular interpretation. You know, with Get Out, you know, you haven't seen it, but it's like obvious that it's about like race and police brutality and like liberals in America. And a lot of people went into this movie thinking that it was going to be a very similar take on something.
Mistake.
But it's like a much bigger conversation that Jordan Peele's trying to have. He's talking about, you know, the forgotten class of people, the people that we acknowledge when we do like super performative gestures like Hands Across America that don't actually benefit or fix homelessness or poverty.
Correct.
It's a logistical nightmare. But it's like a way for liberals and people who want to help with the problem to like feel good about themselves because it's like on the surface looks really nice.
Yeah.
But ultimately they go back to their comfortable lives, and the issue is still there and nothing's been fixed. So that's kind of what a lot of people take as what this movie is trying to talk about. And there's like everything in this movie I really like. The more you watch it, the more like you pick up on things, and it's just like it's brilliant. Like He's so, like, I am so excited for everything that Jordan Peele does because he's just so particular and like there's a reason for everything.
Hmm.
What do you think about that?
Well, I was thinking when you brought up the Hands Across America thing, it does like the class divide and like the othering makes sense, and I think it's like kind of ironic because like they start with Hands Across America like in the 80s, and like I'm sure you looked into it, but for those who have not, it was essentially like a campaign of sorts for millions of Americans to like literally join hands and form an enormous human chain across like the lower 48, so continental US, um, and it was to like raise awareness of like poverty and hunger in America, and it actually, and it was also like, I think also what I took from it that wasn't necessarily mentioned was that it was also supposed to like connect Americans with like other people who live in America, like literally others who live
Yeah.
in America that you wouldn't normally interact with, because you live in your own state, you live in your own town, your own bubble, your own class, etc. And the I think the irony of it is like Hands Across America ended up raising something like $36 million, but after like logistical fees, like you even said, like it's a
Yeah.
logistical nightmare. I'm like, yeah, after like logistic fees and like operation fees or whatever, they only, and only is a light term, they only ended up like giving 15 million to like the actual like ending poverty fund. So like almost half their money went to like other shit
Yeah.
that probably they could have cut down costs on. And it's like a whole, like I could deep dive into like the nonprofit industrial complex, but here to, I always do that. I always like try and like divert, but I won't. But it is like, it's Hands Across America is not the only instance where that happens, and I think that's why they chose something like that. And I also think because of that, and also because it was such like a prominent event prior to when Red was taken,
Hmm.
I think they kind of did it as like a satire, kind of like a satirical, like, well, we're here and we're holding hands and we're Americans too. Like we're here and like you can't take us anywhere. Like we're not
Well,
going
yeah,
back.
with that, it's like it's one of the last things that she remembers from the surface before she was taken down.
Right.
It's like that. It's Michael Jackson's Thriller because that's the shirt that she was wearing before she went
Mm-hmm.
down, and Jeremiah 11:11. So like her jumpsuits. Okay, so I'm gonna like give a little few details. So like when we first open, it's like on the screen we're watching the commercial for Hands Across America, and it's like super cheesy and like feel good weird 80s
12
commercial.
million eyes. I'm like,
Yeah.
ew.
Yeah. It's like super weird. But if you look on either side of the TV, there's like VHS tapes that are representative of like different inspirations for this movie and different things that are kind of contribute to the themes of this movie as well. There was 5 different movies, I think, that I caught. There's Chud, which is a horror movie from 1984. It's like a sci-fi thing. It stands for cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers, and it's about like these like things that live underground that come up to eat humans, basically. And it kind of is,
The predecessor to Tremors.
yeah, no, like for real. Then there's The Goonies, which is about another like adventure story about kids going underground. And even later in the movie, when Red's like, it's our time now, it's like reminiscent of the speech in The Goonies where Sean Astin is like, it's their time up there and it's our time down here, like that whole speech that he gives.
Oh, Sean Astin.
Then there's The Man with Two Brains, which is a 1983 Steve Martin movie, where he like falls in love with a brain. And Jordan Peele said that it's like a
Predecessor to Her.
yeah, it's like a thematic connection, where like two like beings with intelligence are like sharing the same soul, kind of. So that's like, you know, what's going on here. Nightmare on Elm Street, which is one of Jordan Peele's favorite movies, and also Red and all the tethers are wearing like a single brown glove on one of their hands, just like Freddy Krueger does.
Mm-hmm.
And then The Right Stuff, and I'm not really sure why why that's there. But I'm sure other people who have seen this movie and have done like tons of research and deep dive on this can probably let us know. But yeah, so all of those things are also kind of like contributing to the way that she carries out her revolution, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have the Hands Across America. She's like cutting, it's like a symbol in her head of like human connection and like doing something good for the lower class. So it's like her vision of like a statement or like a, you know, it's obviously a very big, powerful like visual statement, but for like a child's brain who's like who wasn't able to develop past that point, that's all it is really. And then Michael Jackson's Thriller, he's, you know, he also had like a red outfit in the Thriller video and a single white glove, you know, it's all kind of tied together. And then what was the last thing I said?
11:11.
Oh yeah, Jeremiah 11:11. Which she's like, I believe God like led us together. I believe that God chose me to lead these people out of here, because that's like the last thing that she saw on the boardwalk before going down into the shaman's hall of mirrors or whatever.
Yeah.
That was
I thought it was
turned
pretty
into the
interesting.
PC world of Merlin's Hall of Mirrors.
Yeah. I saw well, I just thought it was really cool and like kind of like unsettling, like how the tethered like moved with their surface counterpart.
Mm-hmm.
Like the subtle differences, like the guy who was holding the 11:11 sign had like his tether had like 11:11 carved in his forehead.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't hold a sign, I guess. Like, I don't know, like, yeah. I'm like, where'd you get the knife?
There's a ton of like symbols of duality, which I think is another big theme in this movie, is like the duality of America. So like there's two different realities for most Americans. You know, there's the comfortable, you know, just live American dream kind of America that we see. And then there's the underbelly of America where, you know, people are struggling and people are fighting like forces of oppression on a daily basis that this other side of America doesn't really see because it's not part of their everyday reality. So throughout the movie, there's like tons of different symbols of duality, like the rabbit, because they have like two ears that are like the same. There's the scissors, two sides of the same thing. 11:11, which shows up everywhere, like on the clock, on people's shirts, on the guy's sign. There's the twins, there's the two families, there's like obviously the doppelgangers, there's the like a lot of use of mirrors and reflection happening. The like both boys, like Pluto and Jason, both have masks, but they're kind of like the opposite of each other. So like Jason has a wolf mask, like a wolfman mask. But then Pluto has like a human mask to cover his like face, like his beastly face. But yeah.
As far as like duality is concerned, I think it also kind of, well, I don't really know, like I'm gonna riff for a second. Because I was thinking about like what was the point of the Tyler family besides showing that these tethers are like going after like all of their surface counterparts. But then and then like also it's just like, oh, these people are just like rich and annoying. Like I think people want like a satisfying murder in like in a horror movie, you know what I mean? Like everybody wants like the douchey jock to like finally get like his just desserts or whatever. Or like we were talking about Jennifer's Body, like the bitchy like cheerleader gets eaten or whatever. So for that, I was like, why, besides that, like, why do the Tylers exist? And then, you know, you bring up, like, the point of, like, duality. And I think it's also kind of, like, you know, in our society, like, you know, there is, like, certain levels of class. But I really liked how, I don't know, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. But it's, like, kind of, like, I just really like how it was, I guess, like, a woman who was leading this, like, revolution. Like, she, like, and also how, so I'll put the Tylers aside. I don't know why I brought them up besides the fact that like, now it kind of makes sense why they were, you know, mentioned. But I think like focusing more on like the Wilson family.
Yeah.
Kind of how like Gabe is this like, he's like this dorky, like normal, like corny dad. I liked his like comic relief moments. I thought they were very cute, and I was like, I like Gabe. Like I would
Yeah.
probably marry Gabe, you know what I mean? Like he's like just like a very safe, like grounding personality in my opinion, but his doppelganger is like so like he's just like brutish, but he's also like you can also tell he kind of has that like in a weird way you can kind of tell he has that like soft side, but
He's like
he's
a
like tortured. He's just like a
yeah.
tortured creature because
He's
of like
like a puppy dog kind of that's been
yeah
like hurt, you know?
yeah, but he's also like angry. He's like I want to fuck you up, but at the same time like everything hurts. And you're
Yeah.
just like I kind of felt bad for him. I was like, oh, this poor guy,
Like
poor
he
Abraham.
like stole his glasses like immediately because he like up until that point didn't have access to healthcare or, you know, doctors with that could give him glasses, and so he couldn't see. And then he like steals his glasses right away and like that's what he wants. He wants to be able to see just like his tethered or his like person from the surface.
Right. So you know he's just so much more like wounded. You can tell like, and I think also because like you know Adelaide and Red were switched at the beginning, um, like as girls. Like the only reason that like Adelaide was really the well not the only reason, but like a big reason why she was the one to like lead this revolution was because like she spoke English and like she could like she had like surface world experience,
Mm-hmm.
and she's like these people are like and now me like these people are suffering, we're in the darkness, like we need to like overcome this.
Mm-hmm.
This leads to more questions now that I'm talking. I'm like, do they have social security numbers?
I don't think so.
Is their DNA the exact same? I know we have to suspend disbelief, but like, you know, the government, I don't know how long ago the government created this program. It could have been like decades before. It obviously was. Like, it was at least, you know, 30 years prior to when Adelaide was born. And I'm like, so like, is their DNA identical? Like, when their parents, like, when the tethered parents, like, had sex and then, like, the surface parents had sex, like, was it all, like, identical? How did this happen? Where are their records? Obviously, these people don't actually exist, like, in the world of the government. I am just rambling here. I just, like, you asked me a question, like, all this shit just unlocked. But it was as much about, like, battling your own demons as it was about, like, realizing your own potential in a weird way.
Yeah. I know Jordan Peele said like it's about the fear of yourself because like we all like I said earlier, it's like there's a lot of projection on the fear of the other and people
Right.
that you don't know. When in reality, like we're all the same at the end of the day, and we're all like here together, and like facing your inner demons and facing yourself can be just as scary as like being afraid of quote unquote the other.
Right.
Which I think is pretty interesting. But going back to the Tylers, I really liked how they kind of represent like another tier of the like class.
Yeah, I think that was like what I was trying to say.
Because they are literally like at one point Tim Heidecker's character is literally like, oh, but this is my comfy place. I don't want to get up from my comfy place. And that's like the whole movie is about like people not wanting to give up their comfy lifestyle for the sake of these people who have nothing.
Right.
And like Hands Across America is like this big, huge, like performative gesture. But at the end of the day, those people who gave $10 and stood in the line for like 15 minutes get to go home and like think that they did something good, but the people they did it for are still living in hunger and like poverty, you know?
In reality, they only donated like $6 because the other, you know, 4 went to like dumb shit like advertising.
Yeah. I found a quote by President Ronald Reagan because he was president at the time. And I guess there was like some controversy that was like building around this Hands Across America. Like in the days before it happened, like as they were leading up to it. He says, he was responding to like criticism on his budget's reduction to poverty assistance. And he was like, there's enough resources available in this country. He's like, I don't believe that there is anyone going hungry in America simply by reason of denial or lack of ability to feed them. It is by people not knowing where to go or how to get help. It's like, well, this is why you weren't a great president. But
that reminds me literally of an ad. I was just sitting with that for a second because that literally reminds me of an ad I heard today. I was listening to our own podcast, which was like kind of egocentric, but
I do it all the time. It's fine.
I was listening to the Twilight episode. It was great. I will work a Twilight reference into this. I will get my streak going again. But I was like, an ad came on. I was surprised. I was like, do we get money now? I don't think so. But anyway, an Amazon ad, and it was like this. I didn't have like the screen up because I was like actually doing work, which is surprising. But it was Jeff Bezos, I believe his voice, and he was like, oh, like we like Amazon like wants to have like a net zero or a carbon emission net zero by year 2032 or something like that. And he was like, I don't know how we'll get there, but like we're gonna like donate like X amount of money to, you know, to like lower like or to like other environmental groups. And I'm like, listen here, Jabez, I got some hot fire beef with you specifically because you are astronomically rich. I've heard so many statistics about how in my next 14 million lifetimes, I will never make as much money as you currently have. And like, that's infuriating. But what's more infuriating is like your inability to like do anything philanthropic or anything at all.
Helpful? Yeah.
Like, you won't even get yourself hair plugs. Like, I don't know, dude. Like, what are you doing with that money, man? And I understand, like, okay, I am very much a believer in, like, spreading the wealth. Like, if you have excess money and you see there's a cause out there that's important and needs help and you are able to help. So I guess what just, like, irks me is, like, when you just have, like, an inhuman amount of wealth and you almost refuse to do anything about it. Like, Jeff Bezos, tell me what you're going to do in your lifetime with like $12 quadrillion. I don't know actually what his net worth is, but it's a lot of money. It's a lot of fucking money.
He became a trillionaire during a global pandemic.
Right.
So he's not a great guy.
Nah, but I'm like, what are you going to do with like, what, $1 trillion? What are you going to do with that money? What are you going to do with it? You could split that in half and still
be
like
fine.
You could literally hire people to move your body for you for the rest of your life. You could give them 6-figure salaries to move your fingies, to like type out your tweets and like wipe your asshole. You literally could hire a human and pay him or her.
He single-handedly could give us all like free healthcare.
Yeah.
He
single-handedly could solve world hunger. Yeah. Single-handedly could pay like to house homeless people forever.
He could go out in the middle of nowhere and like stand like the people on the beach and just donate some money and poof, hunger in America can be solved. But no, alas.
So referring like back to the Ronald Reagan thing, I guess what irks me is like, is the class divide, like is like that, like you're sitting up on this like, you know, this level, this step, this pedestal, whatever you want to call it, and you're like, you know, fucking, he's in outer space. Bezos is in outer space. We'll put, like, Ronald Reagan on, like, halfway up Mount Everest. I don't know. Anyway, they're looking down and they're like, aw, like, silly little poor child who's starving. Like, just walk down the street and go to this, like, you know, food pantry or whatever. Or, like, use, like, you know, ask for help. And it's like, bitch, we're asking, or not we, I'm fine. Like, people are asking for help and you're, like, you're mad that like the resources that you provided aren't working. Well, why don't you look into why these resources aren't working and like do your best to provide better resources instead of
denying
like,
that
flipping
it
the script and like gaslighting these poor and like starving people.
Yeah.
To the point where they, you know, stab you with a pair of shears.
Yeah. I think that's why Okay, before we go any further, like back to the Tylers. I was trying to say that uh like the representative of like another level of the class. Like um the Adelaide's family, the Wilsons, and the Tylers, like they're both fine. Like they're both middle class families. They're both fine. Both Adelaide and Gabe went to college. Obviously, he wears his Duke, or is it Duke?
It's
No,
Howard.
Howard. He wears his Howard sweatshirt like all the time. Like they're fine. They had access to education. They have access to like they have a beach house, so they're like doing okay. But Gabe is still constantly looking at the Tylers and like what they have and like being like, oh, I want what they have. Like he wants a boat, but the boat that he has is like not good enough. When like most people don't have a boat, they cannot afford a boat. I think one thing I really like about Jordan Peele's movies is like the things that are used to kill people in his movies a lot of the time are like symbols of like wealth. I won't spoil anything and Get Out, but
The flare gun in the boat.
yeah, like the flare gun, it's like rich people thing. I think it's a
It's
golf
like
club.
the crystal.
It's a golf club and a crystal. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like all symbols of like rich people.
Also, like, Ophelia, call the police. And she's like, okay, I'll play fuck the police.
Oh, okay. So with that, like that's also like a symbol of duality.
Yeah.
They're playing the Beach Boys, which is like this symbol of, fun and fancy free California vibes. And then switched with the other reality of California, like black and brown people living in Compton,
Yeah.
So there's these very kind of two sides of living in America, like just within that one scene, which I think is like probably one of my favorite scenes in the movies, and one of my favorite scenes in the movie, because it's like when I first watched it, I was like, ooh, it was like the scariest scene, I think.
My favorite part was when Elizabeth Moss's character is like crawling and then her husband's doppelganger like reaches down to like, I guess like fake take her hand, and she like reaches up and he does like the sight
Yeah.
slides his hand over
Yeah.
his, like slicks back his hair. I was dead. I was like, that shows how much of like this an asshole the surface level,
Guy
whatever the
is,
hell his
yeah.
name was, dude was. Like he just like hardcore sucked. Like they both did. Like they both like were obviously in an unhappy, relationship, but either way, I just thought that was really humorous. That was a weird time. Oh, and then all the other part that like kind of made me like chuckle, and then I was like still like I'm a little unnerved. Was when Gabe was like killing the Mr. Tyler doppelganger on the boat, and Elizabeth Moss is like silently screaming, and then she like starts like silently laughing because like hearkening back to the beach scene where she's like, oh, I fantasize about murdering him. And then she's like watching him get murdered, and she's like upset for a second, and then she's like, oh yeah, no, I like this. Like, yeah, this is good. And then you wonder like what was their relationship like, underground? Like, did they hate each other as much as like the surface Tylers hated each other? Who knows?
Yeah. I think I like how Jordan Peele is kind of talking about how, going back to like, it's us, we're Americans, like they are us and we are them. And if they are given the same opportunities that we have, they will be just like us, which is like proven with the twist at the end that they were switched.
Right.
Because she was able to go from the tethered that couldn't talk and like couldn't dance and all that stuff, and like became this like functional person on the surface.
I liked like the hints, like kind of like you think about like once you see the twist, you kind of think back to like when she like wouldn't talk when she came out of the Hall of Mirrors, and you're like, oh, it's because she like got real scared. And then it's no, like she literally did not know English. Yeah. And then as she learned English, she like came out of her shell, and as she learned to dance, like, yeah, that's exactly what I thought too. It was like circumstance and like perspective changed so much about a person. So if like I actually did read like a small review, but it didn't really say much about like the themes except for the privilege and opportunity kind of side of it, where the writer of the review was like, yeah, I mean, there's probably a guy out there in middle America somewhere who is just like me. The only difference is like he didn't have the financial means, or like he, or like he's a minority, or like, or a woman or whatever. He's like, there's somebody out there who's just like me, who could do everything that I could do, but they just didn't have the opportunity to do it.
Yeah.
And we would be the exact same if we had switched places. And I was like, huh. I mean, it makes sense considering the twist, the reveal, I should say.
Yeah. How do you think this movie kind of correlates or relates to America of 2020? Because this movie came out last year. Like, it's not old.
No. Now more than ever. Like last year, like it was, I mean, it's pretty prevalent no matter like when you see it, but I think now more than ever, this pandemic has kind of like has really highlighted like the difference between classes and between, I guess, in like fresh eyes, like the class difference and like the racial divide, and like, the issue of like people being selfish and like othering people that aren't like them,
mm-hmm.
because, insert reason here.
Yeah.
And the pandemic has kind of like highlighted like these problems are persistent no matter what is going on. Like literally a global pandemic is going on and people are still being, killed by the police. People are still, in poverty. Like the unemployment rate has like skyrocketed. People still aren't wearing fucking masks because
it's inconvenient.
It's against their rights, or like they don't want to wear a mask and they feel like quote unquote oppressed because the government's trying to tell them what to do.
Yeah, I mean it's I think a perfect example of how like in us the government created this problem. They created these people and kept them down there. Didn't give them access to any of the things that we have on the surface. Mm-hmm. And so it was only a matter of time before the people down there got organized, got, educated enough to rise up and take what is rightfully theirs. We kind of are seeing that now. Like this pandemic is highlighting the cracks in the system and how it fails people constantly. Like we're about to see mass evictions because like there's nothing in place to help people who lost their jobs and can't afford to pay rent because of the pandemic. And like there's, people are angry because of like all the racial injustice that continues to happen. Like it's not a new thing, but it's like on its main stage right now. That's why I wanted to watch it this week, because it was just felt very relevant and felt very timely to everything going on right now. Especially like in the intro, I mentioned a lot of shit happening in my town specifically that has to do with abuse of power and like systems failing people to the point where people get murdered. And when people get mad about those systems failing people, the system turns on the people, like trying to oppress them so that nothing changes. And that's kind of what we're seeing all over the country right now. And that's kind of what is touched upon with this revolution that happens in us.
I mean, even today, like literally today, as we are recording this, it was the day that the Attorney General of, I watched a quick clip, like Breonna Taylor's murder. Again, diverging, but like whatever.
It's all relevant. Like,
true. Yeah. I mean, the Attorney General was saying like, oh, like the system worked. Like the system, like these laws were in place, and like because of these laws, like the way that the shooting went down, these two officers and like one detective like weren't responsible, but then this one person who was there was. And I'm like,
Yeah,
Ah!
okay. So he's right. The system is working the way it's supposed to, but that's the problem. It's like the system's not broken. It's working the way it's supposed to. It's just a corrupt system, you know?
Right. And I think,
That's what people are demanding change.
yeah.
So these types of things don't keep happening because like a system that or a society that like murders its most vulnerable and then there's no justice for that is not a good society. And I think that's in a society that like doesn't care about its most vulnerable and like tells them that it's their fault or that if only they like somehow did this when they don't even have access to that thing in order to like get them out of their situation, that's not a good society. I'm trying to be as you know,
Toned
yeah,
down.
I'm trying not to like preach, but you know, I think all of these things are tied into what this movie is trying to talk about, and it just feels very timely and very close to home right now. Like he was onto something, obviously.
Right. I think the one thing about like the revolution that happens in the movie that like I also thought, like literally as we're talking about, I just kind of thought of and I think is fun, not fun, but interesting, is like
It's so
fun and
fun.
exciting. You know what's really sexy about this revolution? I'm gonna tell you.
We are all over the place in this episode.
I have hot fire tips for our revolution. One, eat kale. No, is kind of how, I mean, no one on the surface, like no one who is like, you know, and like by extent, like the upper, like the middle class, upper middle class, like no one knew this was going on. We talked about that.
Yeah.
But then, or they knew and didn't care. I mean, I don't think anybody on the surface besides like the military really knew about the literal tethered, but
Yeah.
But like they probably saw like some of these problems and like we're like you said, like Hands Across America, like they did one thing, they're like,
I mean,
sweet.
Adelaide knew.
Oh yeah, and Adelaide knew, and she didn't
do anything.
want to do anything.
She literally like Red was like, you could have taken me with you.
Yeah.
You didn't have to leave me down here. Like you could have brought me with you. So yeah.
That would have been wild. But completely different movie. But I think like everybody on the surface was like so shook and like so shocked when like, you know, this revolution started happening and like people started getting like, you know, like these tethered had enough and they were going up and they were taking like what they deserved or like what they, you know, wanted this whole time. They just wanted a life on the surface that wasn't like pain and suffering. And I mean, yeah, like they went a little stabby, but I get it. But it kind of ties into like today people are like, well, I just don't understand like why they're protesting and like why they're like, you know, looting and like vandalizing. And it's like, it's not obvious to you. Like,
yeah,
like just do a quick Google search and like
by the
a
time
lot of your
people
questions
catch
will be
on,
answered.
by the time people catch on to like what's happening, it's too late because stuff like this is happening, you know?
Right.
So like by the time the people on the surface realized what was happening below the surface, it was too late for them. We're not quite at that point yet, but the way 2020 is going, who knows? You know, the people are just kind of waking up to these issues now, and it's taking them time. Like it's taking them time to like wrap their head around like why people are reacting the way they are, as if it's like this is the first time this is happening, and they're just reacting unreasonably. When like no, all of this is very reasonable. This has been happening for like hundreds of years. And I'm sorry, but a broken window is not a big deal. You know, like compared to someone being unjustifiably murdered, I would say a broken window is the least of your problems. So,
Right.
But like I said, as you know, by the time people wake up to this and are aware of the issues, it's going to be too late if people don't like actually start fixing things. Back to the movie, I guess. Do you have any other thoughts or things that stuck out to you that you want to talk about?
Nah, I think we covered everything. I guess my one thing, which I guess doesn't really matter, was one of my other like questions, I suppose, was like, okay, so like say they do mostly dominate, the doppelgangers, the tethered, come out from the sewers and just start slashing hoes. What next? Like they hold hands across America, and then it's like, do they just like just resume society? Like they just, I don't know. I'm like, I was a little curious about like what like step 2 is, but I feel like a lot of movies like drop off at like a similar spot where they're like, you're like, ooh, like anything could happen. So it is kind of like a cliffhanger. You're like, what's next?
Yeah, I think a lot of movies about like a revolution in like any arena, that's like where it ends. It's like about the revolution, but then once they win, it's like, okay, what happens now? Like now you have to rebuild society, but nobody wants to make a movie about that.
We watched Hamilton, which technically was not a movie.
Yeah. Yeah, but see how that turned out.
What do you mean?
But yeah, I mean, like most movies about a revolution, it kind of cuts off at the exciting high point. Like, we won, yay! We beat the bad oppressive thing. Now what? Now we have to like rebuild society, and there's not a ton of movies that deal with that part.
I wouldn't even be so quick to say that they actually won. Like,
yeah.
You fail to, like, not fail, but like, you know, you have to think about how like what literally like the surface level people have. Like they have the weapons, they have like, I don't know, they ate vegetables. You know what I mean? Like all the tethered ate were rabbits, and like all they wield are shears. Like, yeah, they're gonna do a lot of damage because they had the element of surprise. But once, like, you know, if we're talking like full blown like quote unquote insurgency here, like no one handles pesky insurgents better than the U.S. government. So I'm not saying I'm on anybody. I'm not on the side of the oppressors, but I'm just saying, like, they kind of dropped off before like the shit really hit the fan, as far as like tethered versus.
You can see like helicopters and stuff like flying above them.
Mm-hmm.
So like obviously they didn't kill everybody. I think like the point of it was just, like I said, you know, by the time you guys know that they exist, it's too late for a lot of people. I think that was kind of the main point. I don't know what will happen from there, but it's fun to speculate.
Sure is. But that was all like I really thought about, like that I had written down. I've riffed enough. I should probably slow my roll. I am gonna write that Cosmopolitan-esque 5 hot fire tips for a revolution.
Hell yeah. Who do you think is like the real bad guy in this movie?
Oh.
It's a thinker, Madeline. It's a thinker.
My brain hurts. My brain, no. Honestly, well, it's tough because like I honestly feel like it was Adelaide.
Yeah.
Because as you said, like she knew what was going on,
and
she was like, "Nah, fuck this. Like I'm just gonna watch out for number 1." But I understand that at the same time. It's like,
yeah, it's like she grew up like in that like underground, and she was trying to further herself from that. She didn't want to go back to that.
Right.
Trying to like do what was best for her and her family, but in doing that, she was like continuing the, you know, oppression of the people below because she didn't do anything to help them.
I mean, she was also like a child, like when she, you know, switched places with the real Adelaide, or I guess Red. Who's the real Adelaide? We don't know.
I mean, she managed to find some handcuffs, so she had some like.
Yeah, she had a pretty sinister plot going on. But I guess like, and then my other thing is like, yeah, you know, Adelaide, who became Red, yeah, she was like handcuffed to like the bunk bed, but somebody obviously uncuffed her at some point. And my question is like, why didn't she leave? You know what I mean? Like she knew the way in. Well, I guess she was like kind of knocked out. But
yeah,
like
she was knocked out. She didn't know.
Oh man.
She was dragged all the way down there.
Never mind. I was gonna say, but at the same time, like if I was her, I would be even maybe. I mean, at 7, it's like hard to say. Like I am 25 years old, so like putting myself in the mind of a 7-year-old, like I would have at least like tried to like figure out how to get out. But then again, like you never know you don't know what actually happened, like, once the switch was made. But I still kind of feel like it was Adelaide. Like, I really feel like she could have been, like, because, I mean, a lot of people speculate that she repressed those memories, but I don't think she did.
I don't think she did either.
I don't think she did, because the way she talked, like, I think she was genuinely afraid that Red was going to exact her revenge. Like, that's kind of how she, like, the attitude she had. She was like, I'm like, so afraid that she's finally, like, caught up to me.
Yeah.
And you're like, you don't talk about that like somebody's, like, caught up to you. Like, you're just like, I don't know. The way she spoke, you're like, I think she remembers this.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't, this none of this comes as a surprise. Like, the moment she saw, like, the family in the driveway, she was like, bitch, get your shoes on. Like, Zora, get your shoes on. Like, we're going.
Yeah.
We're going to Mexico.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it's like it's complicated. It's like they are us, we are them.
Yeah.
We're all at fault. I mean, I don't think the people below who were created and just left down there necessarily, like, are to blame for anything. Obviously, in the movie, upon initial watch, we think that they're the bad guys because they're murdering people. But I think with the twist and the reveals and everything, it becomes really convoluted.
I think when you're watching it, you're kind of like, oh yeah, like, yeah, stab that tethered, because, like you said, yeah, they're the ones exacting, like, very upfront violence. But, you know, as you said, like, as you think about it, you're like, well, you know, like,
they kind of got the short end of the stick for pretty much everything.
Yeah, it kind of adds up a little bit. I don't condone murder. I will say that right now. But, you know, when people get pretty frustrated, like, you're kind of like, yeah, I mean, they were pretty mad.
Yeah. I did like that, the little detail of Red's voice.
Yes.
Because her throat was crushed by the other Red pulling her down.
Yeah, she was big mad if, like, if Red as an adult still could not talk properly. But then again, it was probably, like, she didn't have to speak English. So, like, I'm sure, I mean, I'm not a speech pathologist or anything like that. I always, like, talk about stuff like I'm actually a professional in this field. But I, like, I'm definitely not. I have very few professional licenses. None of them involved, like, being a therapist or a speech pathologist. Anyway, but from the limited knowledge of, like, speech and linguistics that I know, you know, decades of, like, not having to speak English definitely, like, changed probably, like, the way that her vocal muscles were used, because, like, she had to, like, she was just speaking in, like, grunts and, like, yelps or whatever to her family and to other people in the underground. So when she finally, like, had the need and opportunity to speak English, like, one, her voice was probably just, like, messed all the way up from, you know, her throat being snatched. And then also, like, kind of like riding a rusty bike. Like, it was just getting back in the saddle a little bit with how you form words.
Also, I think lastly, I really, really liked the dance sequence at the end, like the fight/dance. I thought that was, like, beautiful filmmaking. Just chef's kiss, beautiful. For a lot of reasons. The song is, like, a combination between I Put Five on It and something from the Nutcracker, Pa de Dieu or something. I'm butchering the pronunciation, but that's what the song's title is, and I think that's what the song from the Nutcracker is also titled. I could be very wrong. I apologize. But
all you Nutcracker fans out there.
I just thought that was very good. It was very, like, mesmerizing, and, like, you could see, like, the different, like, I think that scene shows that, like, more similarities with Adelaide as the tethered and Red as the surface person, because Red throughout the entire thing is very, like, smooth. The way she walks, she's, like, floating. She's very, like, controlled. Adelaide is very, like, clumsy and, like, has the mannerisms of a lot of the tethered. and starts to that kind of starts to manifest
Yeah.
a lot in that scene with like the way that she's like screaming and the way that she's moving compared to Adelaide or compared to Red.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's me.
Fuck you, Madeline. Fuck you.
Right. Cool.
Nice. That's nice,
Back
funny.
to my hot fire tips.
Also, I think it's a complete scam that Lupita Nyong'o was not nominated for an Oscar for this movie. I know that historically horror movies are not typically looked at, but Toni Collette and Hereditary definitely deserved at least a nod.
Mm-hmm.
Lupita Nyong'o played 2 fucking people in this movie and definitely deserved a nod, like for what
Her
she
acting slapped, 100%.
And, you know, not trying to throw shade at any of the people that were nominated this past year, but
I honestly don't even remember. I don't
fine.
remember anything.
It's fine. I'll get over it. Yeah. Any thoughts? Any parting thoughts?
I'm glad I watched it. That's usually how these end. Is like, yeah, I'm glad I saw that. That was pretty cool.
Now that we've discussed it a little bit, has your like thoughts on it changed?
Not
Like,
really.
do you still think something's like missing?
I mean, I probably should watch it again.
Yeah.
And then make that decision. I still feel like I want a little more information on like the tethered, like what their society, what their underground world is like. Like where they get the rabbits. I mean, I know like rabbits breed like rabbits. Like where they get their clothes, like that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like small stuff. I don't know. I like a little bit of extra detail, but the movie was definitely a good watch. Like I was definitely like very invested in the plot.
Yeah.
Not super scary. So if you're like me and you're like a little bit of a baby, you can put your knitting down and watch it. I had all the lights on though. Like don't get it twisted. I was not in the dark watching this movie.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've always been a fan of like of Jordan Peele, like Key and Peele's work. Like I've been interested. It's like one of those things where it's like, oh man, I really want to watch that movie, and then, you know, life just happens. You don't get around to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then COVID hit, and you're like, oh well, I can't go to the movie theater or anything now to see anything. But yeah, I definitely was like just behind the curve on like seeing Jordan Peele's films. So now I feel like I'm catching up. Then I'll go watch Get Out soon.
Yeah.
For sure.
Do it. Yeah. I think I don't know if I ever said this during this podcast, but I really enjoyed this movie. I think it's one of those movies that the more you watch it, the more you appreciate it. And it's just very timely right now. And I felt like it would be good to talk about with you. So I'm glad that you saw it as well.
The one thing I would love, like as far as like behind the scenes and stuff like that, I would love to like just be on set and like watch, like this sounds so creepy, like watch Jordan Peele direct, because like, you know, he doesn't act in any of his movies. At least I don't know about, he wasn't in Us, so I don't know if he was in Get Out.
He did like a voice cameo. He was the voice of the like announcer in the Hall of Mirrors. Like you hear like that voice.
Okay.
Kind of like saying welcome to whatever. That's Jordan Peele.
Okay.
Yeah, he doesn't like physically appear anywhere.
Right. So I guess I still like see him as like a comedic like person. Like he's like, I mean, obviously brilliant, but like very like I still like physically see him in like a comedy like perspective. So I would really love to just see like him like directing and like being involved in creating this movie, because it is beautiful. Like I said, I'm very for like the direction, like the cast, fantastic, like all the choices that were made. As you said, chef's kiss. I love that that's like a trend now. People doing like chef's kiss thing. Very on board.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm just like, I'm a super creep, and I'm like, I would love to be on set and like watch you direct and like not be weird or anything. And I've seen ads for Lovecraft Country, and I'm like, ooh, will I actually get HBO again now that Game of Thrones is over to watch?
I know, I'm like, I need to hop on that, but
yeah. But other than that, I feel like if I talk anymore, we're just gonna like completely diverge into another social topic.
Yeah.
So
That's fair. Well, I'm glad that we were able to watch this and discuss this, and I'm excited to do our next spooky movie. You're not ready.
What?
You're not ready.
Can I predict what? Well,
Nope.
I don't want to predict
Nope.
it.
Nope.
I was gonna say, I think I know what it is.
Nope. Nope. You're not ready.
I have 2 guesses. I'll guess them when we get off air.
All right. Well, until then, I bid you farewell, and I will see you next time. Oh, okay.
But wait, there's more. Just kidding. I just wanted to, because we always forget to do this, throw out our
our
socials.
social medias. Yeah.
So, I don't remember what any of them are.
I have them right here. Give me a second.
Okay.
Thank you, Madeline. Okay. All right. So you can find Another Picture Show podcast, which is this podcast that you're listening to right now. You can find us on YouTube.
You made it this far. I'm sure you've forgotten what you're doing as well, because we have gone.
We're very
so
unorganized, as you could tell. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify and iTunes and Google Podcasts. You can also follow us on Twitter at Another Pic Pod and on Instagram at Another Picture Show. So with that, we can finally say farewell.
But wait, no, I'm kidding. No, I'm done. For real, done this time.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye.